The Greyhound bus rattled to a stop at the gates of Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego, and Sarah Chen's breakfast threatened to make a reappearance. Through the grimy window, she could see them, drill instructors in their iconic smoky bear hats, standing like statues carved from granite and rage. "This is it," whispered the guy next to her, a corn-fed kid from Iowa who looked like he bench-pressed tractors for fun. "No turning back now." Sarah's fingers gripped the edge of her seat. At 52 and 115 pounds, she'd always been small. But right now, wedged between recruits who looked like they'd been ordered from a future action hero catalog, she felt microscopic. Her oversized glasses, the same ones she'd worn since high school because contacts irritated her eyes, kept sliding down her sweat-slicked nose despite the industrial-strength AC blasting through the bus. She pushed them up for the 100th time and caught her reflection in the window. Dark hair pulled into a regulation ponytail. No makeup, not that she ever wore much. A face that her mother called delicate and that everyone else seemed to interpret as fragile. The bus doors hissed open like the jaws of a metal beast. "Get off MY bus. Move, move, move. You think this is summer camp. You think mommy's coming to tuck you in. Move." The voice hit Sarah like a physical force. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, though she wouldn't learn his name until later, stood at the bus entrance, and he was enormous. Not just tall, but built like someone had taken a normal human and scaled them up by 40%. His biceps strained against his uniform sleeves. His jaw could have been used to cut diamonds. And his eyes, dark, assessing, missing nothing, swept over each recruit like a searchlight hunting for weakness. Sarah grabbed her duffel bag with trembling hands and stumbled down the aisle. The Iowa kid ahead of her practically leaped off the bus. Sarah's foot caught on the last step, and she nearly face-planted onto the burning asphalt. "CHEN, Sarah J." Tor's voice exploded in her face as he consulted his roster. He was so close she could smell his coffee breath. "You think the enemy's gonna wait while you find your footing? Move." She scrambled forward, her duffel bag feeling like it weighed 300 pounds in the scorching July heat. The thermometer on the nearby building read 98 degrees, but with the sun beating down on the black asphalt, it felt like standing on the surface of Mercury. Recruits poured off 3 other buses, forming chaotic lines. Sarah found herself in formation, surrounded by giants. The guy to her left had to be 64. The woman to her right, a stunning blonde who looked like she could star in an action movie, had shoulders that could support a small building. Even the other women looked capable of bench-pressing Sarah as a warm-up. "Listen up," another drill instructor, a woman with the build of an Olympic weightlifter and a voice like a foghorn, stalked down the line. "I am Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Lisa Martinez. For the next 13 weeks, your life belongs to the United States Marine Corps. You will eat when we tell you, sleep when we tell you, breathe when we tell you. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am." The response was ragged, uncoordinated. "I can't hear you." "Yes, ma'am," louder this time. Sarah's voice got lost in the thunder of responses from deeper, more powerful lungs. Martinez's eyes locked onto Sarah. Something flickered across her face. Was it concern? Pity? She moved on without comment, but Sarah had seen that look before. The look that said, "You don't belong here." The processing began. They were herded into a building where civilian barbers waited with electric clippers. Sarah watched as the Iowa kid's magnificent blonde mane fell to the floor in golden chunks. The guys were all getting buzz cuts, heads shaved down to stubble. The women kept more hair, but not much. When Sarah sat in the chair, the barber, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, met her eyes in the mirror. "You sure about this, honey? You look like you should be studying for finals, not running obstacle courses." Sarah's jaw tightened. "I'm sure." The clippers buzzed to life, and chunks of her dark hair joined the multicolored carpet of discarded locks on the floor. When it was done, Sarah barely recognized herself. She looked younger, more vulnerable. Perfect, she thought bitterly. Next came the uniform issue. Sarah stood in line at the supply depot, waiting for her turn. When she reached the counter, the supply sergeant, a grizzled man who looked like he'd been issuing gear since World War II, sized her up with one glance. "Extra small," he called over his shoulder. "Extra small on everything," came the reply. He dumped an armload of camouflage uniforms, combat boots, and gear onto the counter. "Good luck, kid," he muttered, and there was something sad in his voice that made Sarah's stomach twist. By the time they reached the barracks, a long, institutional building that smelled of industrial cleaner and anxiety, Sarah's arms were shaking from carrying her gear. Around her, other recruits were already claiming bottom bunks, the prime real estate. By the time Sarah found an open spot, only top bunks remained. She stared up at the mattress that was level with her chin. "Need a boost, sweetheart?" She turned. A male recruit, 6 feet tall easy, with the kind of cocky grin that suggested he'd been popular in high school, stood with his arms crossed, smirking. "I'm fine," Sarah said quietly. "You sure? Because you're gonna have to get up there every night for the next 3 months. That's a lot of climbing for someone your size." Other recruits were watching now. Some looked sympathetic, others amused. A few, including the blonde woman from formation, looked annoyed on Sarah's behalf. Sarah said nothing. She positioned her duffel bag, used it as a step, and hauled herself onto the bunk with all the grace of a wounded seal. Her arms screamed in protest. She'd made it, but just barely. Laughter rippled through the barracks. Not cruel laughter, not yet, but the kind that said, "This is going to be interesting." As Sarah lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling 6 inches from her nose, she heard whispers floating through the room. How'd she even get in? Probably some diversity quota thing. I give her 2 weeks before she quits. 1 week. She won't make it past the initial PT test. Sarah's hands balled into fists. She wanted to scream at them, wanted to tell them who she really was, what she could really do. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was to prove herself the hard way, the right way, the way her father, Master Gunnery Sergeant James Chen, retired, had taught her. "Earn it," he'd said the day she enlisted. "Don't tell them, show them." From somewhere in the barracks, a female voice cut through the whispers. "Hey, can we maybe not be jerks on day one?" The blonde from formation. She was leaning over the edge of her bunk, glaring at the whisperers. "I'm just saying," the cocky guy started. "And I'm just saying shut up. We're all here to become Marines. Let's see who actually makes it before we start running our mouths." Blessed silence fell. Later, as the sun set and the drill instructors finally released them for the night, Sarah lay in her bunk, every muscle already aching. Tomorrow would bring the initial PT test. Running, pull-ups, crunches, everything she was worst at. She thought about her mother's training facility back in San Diego, just 20 miles from this base. Thought about the mats where she'd spent 10,000 hours learning to make size irrelevant. Thought about the tournaments she'd won, the black belts she'd beaten, the national championships she'd claimed. None of that mattered here. Here, she was just the small girl who'd nearly tripped getting off the bus. But as Sarah finally drifted toward sleep, her hands unconsciously moved through muscle memory. Grips, chokes, joint locks ingrained so deeply they were like breathing. 56 days. That's all she had to wait. 56 days until MCMAP training. 56 days to be underestimated. And then everything would change. Sarah Chen smiled in the darkness and whispered to herself. Just wait, week 3 Tuesday, 5:30 hours, the obstacle course. Sarah stood at the starting line with 22 other recruits from her platoon, her legs already trembling from the 5-mile run they'd completed at dawn. The California sun was barely up, but the heat was already oppressive, the air thick enough to chew. "CHEN," Staff Sergeant Tor's voice cracked like a whip. "You're going last. I want you to watch how it's supposed to be done." The other recruits exchanged glances, Some sympathetic, most just grateful it wasn't them being singled out. Sarah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She watched as Marcus Webb, the 63, former college wrestler who'd become the platoon's unofficial alpha, attacked the course like it had personally insulted him. He flew over the 6-foot wall, swung across the monkey bars without breaking stride, and scaled the rope climb in 15 seconds flat. When he hit the finish line, he wasn't even breathing hard. Time, 3 minutes 47 seconds. That's how a Marine moves, Torres bellowed. Next. One by one, the recruits completed the course. Most finished in under 5 minutes. Even the weakest male recruit, a skinny kid named Rodriguez who couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds, finished in 5:23. Then came the women. The blonde from Sarah's barracks, whose name was Jessica Garrett, crushed it in 4:15, moving with the fluid athleticism of someone who'd been a Division I athlete. The other women varied, but all finished under 6 minutes. "Chen, you're up." Sarah's legs felt like concrete as she approached the starting line. Every eye in the platoon was on her. She could feel their doubt like a physical weight. "Begin." She launched forward, hitting the low crawl first. Barbed wire stretched above her, inches from her back. She pulled herself through the mud with her elbows, ignoring the rocks that dug into her ribs. So far, so good. The 6-foot wall loomed ahead. Sarah hit it at a dead sprint, jumped, and her fingers just barely caught the top edge. She dangled there for a horrible moment, arms screaming, legs kicking uselessly. With a surge of desperate strength, she hauled herself over and dropped to the other side. Time, 1 minute 30 seconds, already behind pace. The monkey bars were next. Sarah jumped, caught the first bar, swung to the second. Her grip was good. Years of jiu-jitsu had given her iron hands, but her arms were already exhausted from the wall. She made it halfway across before her fingers started to slip. No. She fell into the sand pit below, landing hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. "Get up, Chen. The enemy doesn't give you a timeout." Sarah scrambled up, ran around the monkey bars, the penalty route, and faced her nemesis, the rope climb. 20 feet of thick manila rope stretched toward the sky. This was what had broken her every single time. She grabbed the rope, wrapped her legs around it the way she'd been taught, and pulled. Her hands, already raw and bleeding through the tape, screamed in protest. She made it 5 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet. Her arms gave out. Sarah slid down the rope, the friction burning through her gloves, and collapsed at the bottom in a heap. Time, 8 minutes 43 seconds. The silence was deafening. The maximum allowable time was 8 minutes. Sarah had failed. Torres stood over her, his face unreadable. "Chen, my office, 1300 hours dismissed." The mess hall at lunch was its own special kind of torture. Sarah sat alone at the end of a long table, methodically working through her meal while the training manual lay open beside her tray. She was studying the section on hand-to-hand combat techniques, memorizing angles and pressure points. "Yo, Professor." She didn't look up. She knew that voice, Marcus Webb, flanked by 3 of his buddies. Marcus dropped his tray across from her with a loud clatter. "You know you failed the O course this morning, right? That's strike 2. One more failure and you're recycled. You get that?" Sarah took a bite of her sandwich, chewing slowly. "I'm aware." "Then why are you still here?" Marcus leaned forward, and there was something almost like concern in his voice. "Look, no offense, but you're drowning. You can barely do 3 pull-ups. You're dead last in every run. You can't get over the wall without help. Why torture yourself?" "Because I'm still here," Sarah said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "Still here," one of Marcus's friends, a guy named Thompson with a thick Boston accent, laughed. "Girl, you won't be here in another week. Torres is gonna drop you like a bad habit." Sarah's chopsticks, she'd specifically requested them instead of a fork, a small rebellion, moved precisely as she picked up a piece of chicken. Maybe. Maybe, Marcus shook his head. There's no maybe. This isn't college. You can't just study your way through boot camp. You need to be strong. You need to be fast. You need to. I know what I need to be, Sarah interrupted, her voice still quiet but with an edge now. And I'm working on it. Thompson snorted. Yeah, how's that working out for you, Professor? Before Sarah could respond, Jessica Garrett appeared, slamming her tray down next to Sarah's. How about you three focus on your training and let her focus on hers? Marcus held up his hands. Hey, we're just trying to help. By telling her she's going to fail, real helpful, Webb. Jessica turned to Sarah. Ignore them. You've got this. But as Marcus and his friends walked away, Sarah heard Thompson mutter, $5 says she's gone by Friday. I'll take that bet, Marcus replied. I say Wednesday. Their laughter echoed through the mess hall. That night after lights out at 2100 hours, Sarah waited. She counted the seconds, listening to the breathing of her fellow recruits as it gradually deepened and slowed. At 200 hours, when she was certain everyone was asleep, she slipped out of her bunk. The bathroom at the end of the barracks was small, lit by a single flickering fluorescent light. Sarah locked herself in the largest stall, the one with just enough room to move. And then she began. Shadow boxing first. Her hands moved through combinations that would have made professional fighters jealous. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut, flowing seamlessly into elbow strikes and knee thrusts. Each movement was precise, economical, perfect. This was what 10,000 hours of training looked like. She dropped into a crouch, practicing level changes. Shot in for imaginary takedowns. Drilled arm drags, hip throws, foot sweeps, all in complete silence except for the whisper of her feet on the tile floor. Her body remembered what her mind sometimes doubted. Here, alone in this bathroom at 2 in the morning, she wasn't the weak recruit who couldn't climb a rope. She was Sarah Chen, 3-time national champion. The girl who'd submitted black belts twice her size. The fighter who'd never been stopped in competition. But none of that mattered if she couldn't pass the basic requirements. Sarah straightened, facing her reflection in the mirror. Her face was thinner than it had been 3 weeks ago. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hands were wrapped in bandages to cover the blisters and cuts from the rope climb. She looked like she was losing. Good, she thought, let them think that. Because what they didn't see was how she studied every instructor demonstration with photographic intensity. How she memorized every technique, every vulnerability, every opening. How she was building a catalog of knowledge that would matter when it finally counted. 53 days left until MCMAP training. 53 days to survive. Sarah practiced one more combination, a complex sequence involving a duck, a level change, a double leg takedown, and a transition to mount position, and then crept back to her bunk. As she climbed up, still graceless, still struggling, she heard a voice whisper from the darkness. You okay, Chen? Jessica Garrett, from the bunk below. Yeah, Sarah whispered back, just needed the bathroom. A pause, then, that's the 3rd night this week you've been up at 200. You sure you're okay? Sarah's heart hammered. Had Jessica heard, seen something? Just nervous, Sarah lied, can't sleep. Another pause, then, look, I know it's hard, but if you need help with anything, PT, studying, whatever, just ask, okay? Something in Sarah's chest tightened. Thanks, Garrett. Jess, call me Jess. Thanks, Jess. Sarah lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she had to meet with Tors. Tomorrow he might tell her she was being recycled, or worse, sent home. But as exhaustion finally dragged her toward sleep, Sarah's hands moved through muscle memory one last time, practicing the grip for a rear naked choke. In 53 days they'd see. In 53 days, everything would change. But first she had to survive tomorrow, week 8, Thursday, 900 hours, the gymnasium. Sarah had survived, barely. The meeting with Tors 5 weeks ago had been brutal. He'd laid out her options in stark terms: improve or leave. She'd improved marginally. Her rope climb time was still terrible, but she could now complete it. Her pull-ups had increased from 3 to 5. She could finish the obstacle course in 7:58, 2 seconds under the maximum. She was the weakest recruit in her platoon, by every measurable standard. But she was still here. Now, standing in formation with her platoon in the massive gymnasium, Sarah felt electricity in the air. MCMAP Week had finally arrived. Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, the hand-to-hand combat training that combined techniques from multiple disciplines. This was what she'd been waiting for. At the front of the gym stood Staff Sergeant Tors, arms crossed, expression severe. Behind him, 8 Marines from the Security Force Battalion stood in a line that looked like it had been assembled by a military recruitment poster artist. These weren't recruits, these were real Marines. Sergeant First Class Ryan Matthews stood in the center, 64, 240 pounds of solid muscle, with a Purple Heart ribbon on his dress uniform and a scar running through his left eyebrow that spoke of combat experience. To his right was Corporal Tank Williams, who'd earned his nickname by literally looking like an armored vehicle in human form. Lance Corporal Jenkins had the lean, dangerous look of a jungle cat. Corporal Davis wore the expression of someone who'd seen things and was unimpressed by everything. These men had fought in Fallujah, Helmand Province, Ramadi. They had real combat experience, real training, real scars. "Listen up," Tor's voice echoed off the gym walls. "The Marine Corps doesn't care how big you are, doesn't care how much you can bench press. We care about effectiveness. We care about technique. These Marines behind me are MCMAP black belts, combat veterans. They're going to demonstrate why skill matters more than size." He paused, letting that sink in. "We need volunteers to get absolutely destroyed. This is a learning opportunity. You will lose, you will be embarrassed, but you will learn who's brave enough." Hands shot up immediately. 17 recruits volunteered in the first 3 seconds, including Marcus Webb, who practically leaped forward. WBB, front and center. Marcus jogged to the mat, confidence radiating from every pore. He'd been talking about this for weeks, how his wrestling experience would translate, how he'd studied MCMAP techniques, how he was going to make a good showing. He faced off against Corporal Davis, who was 3 inches shorter and 30 pounds lighter. The demonstration lasted exactly 47 seconds. Davis moved like water, slipping Marcus's attempted takedown, redirecting his energy, and using a textbook hip throw that sent the bigger man flying. Before Marcus could recover, Davis had him in an arm bar. Marcus tapped frantically, his face red with pain and embarrassment. The gymnasium was silent, except for Marcus's heavy breathing as he limped back to formation. Next, 5 more recruits went up, all men, all confident. All ended up on the mat within 2 minutes, some limping, all humbled. The 8th recruit, a cocky kid named Patterson who'd been bragging about his karate black belt, lasted 93 seconds before a joint lock made him scream. Tors surveyed the remaining recruits. "Anyone else feeling brave? Last chance before we move on to basic techniques." His eyes swept the formation and landed on Sarah. She'd been watching every demonstration with unblinking intensity, her gaze tracking movements, angles, weight distributions. Tors saw something in her focus that made him pause, a stillness that seemed out of place in someone who struggled with every physical task. "Chen," he called, his voice slightly softer, "you've been watching pretty carefully. You understand what you're seeing." Every head turned. Sarah felt heat rise to her face. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "And what are you seeing?" The gym held its breath. This was unusual. Tors didn't typically question recruits during demonstrations. Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. "I'm seeing leverage, Staff Sergeant. how smaller opponents can use technique and timing to overcome size disadvantages. Tor's eyebrow raised slightly. That's correct. Sit tight, Chen. Watch and learn. But Sarah didn't sit tight. She stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and somehow final, like a door closing or a die being cast. Staff Sergeant, her voice cut through the silence, stronger now. I volunteer. The reaction was instantaneous. Laughter erupted, not mean-spirited, but the kind of laughter that comes from sheer disbelief. Someone actually gasped. Marcus Webb turned around so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. Chen, I don't think, Tors began. I volunteer, Staff Sergeant. Sarah took off her glasses, folded them with practiced precision, and handed them to Jessica Garrett, who'd frozen mid-breath beside her. Permission to attempt the demonstration. Without her glasses, Sarah's eyes were different, sharper. There was something predatory in them that nobody had seen before because she was always squinting behind those lenses. Tors felt a warning bell ring in his mind. Something was off. Chen, these are combat veterans, black belts. They will hurt you. Not intentionally, but... I understand the risks, Staff Sergeant. The 8 Security Force Marines were exchanging glances now. Sergeant Matthews stepped forward, his expression troubled. Staff Sergeant, respectfully, I don't think this is appropriate. We're trained to go full contact. I can't guarantee. How many recruit? Tors interrupted, still looking at Sarah. The gymnasium fell dead silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming. Staff Sergeant, Sarah asked. How many Marines do you want to face? Standard demonstration is 1-on-1, sometimes 2-on-1 for advanced students. Sarah's jaw set. In that moment, something shifted in her posture, subtle but real. Her weight distributed differently. Her shoulders relaxed. She looked somehow both smaller and more dangerous. All 8, Staff Sergeant. Her voice didn't waver. At the same time, full contact. The laughter that erupted was different now, nervous, shocked, almost angry. Someone shouted, "Is she crazy?" Thompson, Marcus's friend, yelled. Professor's finally lost it. Even Jessica grabbed Sarah's arm. Sarah, don't, you'll get hurt. These guys are. I know what they are, Sarah said quietly, gently removing Jessica's hand. Tors stared at her. In 20 years of service, he'd never had a recruit, especially not the weakest recruit in the platoon, make such an insane request. His instinct screamed to shut this down, to protect her, to save her from herself. But there was something in her eyes, something that didn't match the girl who couldn't climb a rope, something that made absolutely no sense. Staff Sergeant, Sergeant Matthews protested, we can't. We're twice her size. Someone will get hurt and it'll be her. I won't be responsible for. You won't be responsible, Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through the chaos with unexpected authority. I take full responsibility. Staff Sergeant Tors, permission to sign a waiver acknowledging the risks. The gym was in chaos now. Recruits were shouting. The Security Force Marines looked genuinely distressed. This had gone from a training demonstration to something else entirely. Tors pulled out his radio, spoke quietly into it. 30 seconds later, the battalion commander's voice crackled back. Is she serious? Yes, sir. Is she suicidal? Tors looked at Sarah, who stood perfectly still, perfectly calm, like the eye of a hurricane. No, sir, I don't think so. A long pause, then, get it on film. If she's that determined, let her learn the hard way. But stop it the second she's in danger. Tors clicked off the radio. He looked at the 8 Marines who were still protesting. He looked at Sarah, who hadn't moved. Chen, last chance, walk away. No shame, no consequences. Sarah's lips curved into the smallest smile, not confident, not cocky, just knowing. With respect, Staff Sergeant, I've been waiting 8 weeks for this. Tors blew his whistle, and the sound silenced the entire gymnasium. Demonstration bout, 8 versus 1. Full contact MCMAP rules. Tap out or unconscious stops the fight. Chen, if you can't continue, call IT. These Marines will not hold back. Do you understand? Yes, Staff Sergeant. Marines, take your positions. The 8 Security Force Marines walked onto the mat, and despite their protests, they spread out professionally. They were Marines. They'd follow orders, but Sergeant Matthews leaned down as Sarah stepped onto the mat. "Kid," he said quietly, his voice almost gentle, "please don't make me hurt you. Just tap out early, okay? There's no shame." Sarah looked up at him, way up, since he towered over her by more than a foot. "Sergeant," she said softly, "you can try." Something in her voice made Matthews's eyes narrow. He'd heard that tone before in Fallujah, from an insurgent fighter who'd turned out to be far more dangerous than he looked. The 8 Marines formed a loose circle around Sarah. She stood in the center, 52 and 115 pounds, surrounded by nearly 2,000 pounds of trained muscle and combat experience. The entire gymnasium held its breath. Torres raised his whistle. "On my marks, begin." And Sarah Chen stopped being the weakest recruit in the platoon. She became something else entirely. The whistle's shrill cry hadn't even finished echoing when Sergeant Ryan Matthews made his move. He'd been in combat, he'd fought insurgents in close quarters, he'd trained for years, and his instinct, honed by experience, told him to end this fast before the girl got hurt. A quick takedown, a controlled submission, tap out, done. Merciful. Matthews charged forward with a textbook double-leg takedown, the same move that had dropped men twice Sarah's size. 240 pounds of muscle and momentum, closing the distance in less than a second. Sarah didn't back up. That was the first thing that shocked everyone watching. She moved forward into his charge. It made no tactical sense. You don't run toward a freight train. But Sarah wasn't running, she was calculating. Matthews's hands reached for her legs. At the last possible microsecond, Sarah pivoted on her right foot, a movement so smooth it looked choreographed, and her hands caught his extended right arm. She didn't try to stop his momentum, she used it. Her hip slotted under his center of gravity. A classic jiu-jitsu throw, ogoshi, the major hip throw, but executed with such perfect timing that Matthews's own force launched him through the air. His 240-pound body became a missile. He crashed into Corporal Davis, who'd been moving in from the opposite angle. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs and confusion. Elapsed time, 3 seconds. 6 left. "What the?" Tank Williams started to say, but training overrode shock. He and Lance Corporal Jenkins attacked simultaneously from Sarah's flanks, a pincer movement that should have been inescapable. Sarah's eyes tracked both of them without turning her head. In jiu-jitsu, they called it soft eyes, seeing everything, focusing on nothing. She'd been drilling this for 15 years. Jenkins reached her first, going for a clinch. Sarah dropped her weight impossibly low, her center of gravity suddenly at knee level, and swept Jenkins's front leg with her shin. The sweep was textbook de la Riva, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu staple. Jenkins's feet went out from under him, and as he fell, Sarah was already moving. She rose up under Williams's incoming grab, her elbow driving upward into his solar plexus with surgical precision. Not his face. That would cause damage. The solar plexus. It would knock the wind out of him without injury. The sound of impact echoed through the gym like a drumbeat. Williams's eyes went wide, his diaphragm spasmed. He couldn't breathe. He dropped to his knees, gasping. Jenkins was still falling. Sarah's hand shot out, grabbed the back of his uniform and pulled, accelerating his fall. He face-planted onto the mat with a heavy thump. Elapsed time, 12 seconds. 4 left. The gymnasium had gone from shocked laughter to dead silence. This wasn't possible. This wasn't happening. But it was. Corporals Rodriguez and Moore had seen enough. They were experienced Marines, and they just watched half their team get dismantled in 12 seconds. They approached cautiously, professionally, abandoning the aggressive rush tactics. They circled Sarah like wolves, looking for an opening. Sarah's breathing was controlled, steady. Her eyes tracked both men with that same predatory calm. She didn't wait for them to decide, she attacked. She feinted left toward Rodriguez. He reacted, raising his guard. But Sarah had already committed to Moore, closing the distance before he could adjust. Her hands grabbed his wrist, the same wrist he'd extended reflexively to defend, and pulled while stepping behind him. An arm drag, one of jiu-jitsu's most fundamental techniques. Moore's balance broke. Sarah used his momentum to turn him, got her hooks in, her legs wrapping around his waist from behind, and her forearm slid across his throat. Rear naked choke, the king of submissions. Moore's training kicked in. He grabbed her arm, trying to prevent the choke from tightening, but Sarah's positioning was perfect. She arched her back, creating pressure. Moore had maybe 5 seconds before he'd pass out. Rodriguez rushed in to help his teammate, grabbing Sarah's shoulder to pull her off. Big mistake. Sarah used Rodriguez's pull as leverage, released Moore, and rolled with the pull instead of against it. Rodriguez stumbled backward from his own momentum. Sarah rolled through, came up on her feet behind him, and delivered 2 lightning-fast strikes to pressure points on either side of his neck, the vagus nerve, the same target police officers use for compliance holds. Rodriguez's legs buckled, not from pain but from the neurological shock. He went down. Moore was still gasping for air from the choke, on his hands and knees. Elapsed time, 23 seconds. 2 left standing, Sergeant Matthews and Corporal Davis, both of whom had recovered from the initial collision. Matthews's expression had changed. The concern was gone, now there was respect and wariness. "She's trained," he said to Davis. "It wasn't a question." "Very," Davis replied, circling. They came at her together, but smart this time. No rushing, no overcommitting. Matthews went high, Davis went low. A coordinated attack that should have been unbeatable. Sarah read it like a book she'd written herself. As Matthews reached for her upper body, Sarah dropped again, that same impossibly low crouch, and rolled. Not backward, not sideways. She rolled forward between them, threading the needle of their attack. She came up behind Matthews, and before he could turn, her arms were around his waist. It looked like she was trying to lift him, absurd given their size difference. But she wasn't lifting him. She was off-balancing him. A Greco-Roman wrestling technique, modified. Sarah's hip checked the back of Matthews's knee while her arms drove his upper body forward. His center of gravity broke. He went down, and Sarah rode him like a bronco, transitioning to side control. Davis dove in to break it up. Sarah saw him coming. As his hands reached for her, she trapped his right arm against Matthews's body, using Matthews as a human anchor, and rolled Davis over her, using his own momentum against him. Now both Marines were on the ground, tangled with each other, and Sarah was flowing between positions like water, never stopping, never settling. Side control, mount back control, each transition was seamless. Matthews tried to buck her off, couldn't. She was too technical, her weight distribution perfect. Davis tried to escape. Sarah's legs were already hooking his, controlling his hips. Elapsed time, 34 seconds. The remaining 4 Marines had recovered. They charged in simultaneously, a desperate attempt to overwhelm her with pure numbers. This was it. This was what Sarah had trained for. Not one opponent, not 2, multiple attackers. The scenario every self-defense instructor says is impossible to win. Sarah exploded into motion. She released Matthews and Davis, rolled away from the incoming rush, popped to her feet. Tank Williams, still wheezing but functional, grabbed for her. Sarah ducked under his arms, came up inside his guard, and delivered a perfect uppercut, controlled, not full power, to his chin. His head snapped back, his eyes glazed. He stumbled backward and sat down hard, more shocked than hurt. Jenkins tried a different approach, a tackle from the side. Sarah saw it peripherally, jumped, and used Jenkins's own head and shoulders as a platform. She literally ran across his back as he dove past, landing behind him. Rodriguez and Moore came from opposite sides. Sarah waited until the last microsecond, then dropped flat. They collided with each other above her, a painful meeting of heads and shoulders. Elapsed time, 42 seconds. Only Matthews and Davis were still truly in the fight. They'd gotten to their feet, were breathing hard, were looking at Sarah with something approaching awe. "Kid," Matthews said, "where did you?" Sarah didn't let him finish. She feinted toward Matthews, making him raise his guard, then pivoted and exploded at Davis. The attack was so fast, so unexpected, that Davis barely got his hands up. Sarah grabbed one wrist, pulled him off balance, and transitioned into a flying armbar, wrapping her legs around his extended arm while falling backward. They hit the mat together, and Sarah's legs were locked around Davis's elbow joint, hyperextending it. Davis tapped immediately, 3 rapid taps, tap, tap, tap. Sarah released him instantly. Elapsed time, 44 seconds. Matthews was the last one standing. He looked at his 7 teammates, all on the ground, all groaning, all defeated. He looked at Sarah, who'd risen to her feet, barely breathing hard. He could charge her, should charge her. He was a Marine, Marines don't quit. But Matthews was also smart, and he'd seen enough. He raised his hands, palms out, a gesture of surrender. "I'm good," he said, half laughing in disbelief. "I'm real good, Uncle, you win." The digital timer on the wall read, 45 seconds. Sarah stood in the center of the mat, surrounded by 8 defeated Marines, and calmly walked over to retrieve her glasses from a stunned Jessica Garrett. The gymnasium was so silent you could hear the ventilation system humming. Then someone started clapping, slowly, then another person, then another. Within 5 seconds, the entire gymnasium erupted. But Sarah didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just put her glasses back on, pushed them up her nose, and stood at attention. Staff Sergeant Torres stood frozen, his whistle still at his lips, his mind trying to process what he just witnessed. Finally, he found his voice. "Chin, my office, now." As Sarah walked toward the exit, 8 security force Marines lay on the mat behind her. And every single person in that gymnasium knew they just witnessed something impossible. Something that would change everything. Tor's office was small, utilitarian, and currently felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Sarah stood at attention in front of his desk, her uniform still damp with sweat, a small cut above her left eyebrow bleeding slightly from where Corporal Davis had clipped her during the exchange. Behind Tor's, the window overlooked the parade ground where other platoons were drilling in the afternoon heat. Tor's wasn't sitting. He was packing, his jaw working like he was chewing nails. In his hand was Sarah's personnel file, not the abbreviated version he'd been reading for 8 weeks, but the complete file. The one that had been sitting in the classified section of the admin office, marked Recruits Request Restricted Access. His hands were shaking. Sarah Jin Chen. He read each name like it was a separate accusation. Born March 15, 2003, San Diego, California. Daughter of Master Gunnery Sergeant James Chen, retired after 25 years of service, 3 combat deployments, Silver Star recipient. He looked up at her. "Your father is a decorated Marine and you didn't think that was relevant." "It wasn't relevant to my service, Staff Sergeant," Sarah said quietly. "Not relevant," Torres bit back whatever he was going to say and kept reading. "Mother, Keiko Nakamura Chen, 6th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, former competitor on the international circuit, owner and head instructor at Elite Combat Academy, San Diego." He slammed the file down on his desk. You started training at 5 years old. 5. Most kids are learning to tie their shoes, and you were learning how to choke people unconscious. Sarah said nothing. Torres picked up the file again, his voice rising. Junior National Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Champion, 2019, 2020, and 2021. Competed in the Pan American Championships twice, medaled both times. Trained with the Gracie family in Brazil for 6 months in 2020. Muay Thai certifications, wrestling experience, judo brown belt. He pulled out a photograph that had been paperclipped to one of the pages. It showed a younger Sarah on a podium, gold medal around her neck, standing next to 2 other competitors who towered over her. Her smile was radiant. 23 tournament wins. 3 losses, all by decision, never submitted, never knocked out. You've beaten black belts. You've beaten men twice your size. You've beaten professional fighters. Torres walked around his desk, standing directly in front of Sarah. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more intense. You let me think you were weak. You let me think you were going to wash out. You let me watch you struggle for 8 weeks, and all this time you could have. He stopped, running his hand over his face. Do you have any idea what you just did out there? I volunteered for a training demonstration, Staff Sergeant. You HOSPITLIZD 3 Marines. They're not hospitalized, Staff Sergeant. I was very careful about. Corporal Davis has a hyperextended elbow. Tank Williams can't breathe right. Jenkins has a concussion from face planting. All minor injuries that will heal within days, Sarah said, and there was the slightest edge to her voice now. If I wanted to seriously hurt them, I could have, but I didn't. Every strike was controlled. Every submission was released immediately upon tap. I know exactly how much force. That's not the point, Torres exploded. The point is you lied. I didn't lie. Sarah's voice was calm, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. I never claimed to be weak. I never claimed to lack training. I simply didn't volunteer information that wasn't required on my enlistment paperwork. You deliberately hid your background. Yes, Staff Sergeant, I did. The admission hung in the air. Torres stared at her, and Sarah could see the war happening behind his eyes. Anger, respect, confusion, all battling for dominance. Why, he finally asked, why would you do that? For the first time since entering the office, Sarah's rigid posture softened slightly. She swallowed hard, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Because I'm tired of being special, Staff Sergeant. Torres blinked. What? My whole life I've been the martial arts prodigy. The girl who could beat adults when she was 12, the national champion, my mother's star student, my father's pride and joy. Sarah's voice cracked. Do you know what that's like, to never just be normal? She took a shaky breath. When I told my parents I wanted to enlist, my father was thrilled. He immediately contacted his old commanding officers, started making calls. Wanted to make sure I got into a special program, got recognition, got fast-tracked. And my mother wanted me to demonstrate at the recruitment center to inspire other women to join. Sarah's eyes were wet now, though no tears fell. But I didn't want that. I didn't want to be a poster child. I didn't want special treatment. I didn't want instructors going easy on me because of my background or harder on me to prove themselves. I wanted to know, her voice broke completely. I wanted to know if I could actually be a Marine, not Sarah Chen, champion fighter, just Sarah Chen, Marine. Torres' anger deflated like a punctured tire. He leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms. So you requested your competitive background be classified? Yes, Staff Sergeant. My father was furious. We didn't speak for 2 months. He said I was throwing away an advantage, that I was being stupid and prideful. He might have been right. Maybe, Sarah straightened again. But I needed to know, could I pass the runs, the obstacle course, the rifle qualifications, all the things I'm not naturally good at, could I earn it? And could you? Sarah met his eyes. I'm still here, aren't I, Barely, by the skin of my teeth, dead last in half the qualifications, but I'm still here. Tors was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. Chen, do you understand what you've done? That video, he gestured to his computer screen where the security footage was already pulled up, is going to spread. By tonight, every Marine on this base will have seen it. By tomorrow, it'll be on every base in the Corps. You can't hide anymore. Sarah's face went pale. I didn't want. I know what you wanted, but that ship has sailed. Tors pulled out his chair and sat heavily. The commandant's office already called, twice. They want you transferred to a special MCMAP instructor program, fast-tracked through infantry school. They want to use you for recruitment videos, demonstrations, PR campaigns. No, the word came out sharp, almost panicked. Staff Sergeant, no, I don't want that. I just want to finish boot camp and serve like everyone else. That's not going to be possible now. Then I'll decline. You can't decline orders, recruit. Then Sarah's breath was coming faster. I'll fail the next PT test. I'll request reassignment. You'll do nothing of the sort. Tor's voice was firm. Listen to me, Chen. What you did today was extraordinary. Not because you won, although that was impressive, but because you've shown every recruit out there that size doesn't determine capability. That technique beats strength. That underdogs can win. He leaned forward. Do you know how many female recruits wash out because they think they can't compete? How many small guys quit because they think the Corps is only for giants? You just proved them all wrong in 45 seconds. But I don't want to be a symbol. Too late, Tor's voice wasn't unkind. You already are. The question is, what kind of symbol will you be? The girl who hid her light under a bushel, or the Marine who earned her place and then helped others earn theirs? Sarah was silent, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Tors pulled a tissue box from his drawer, kept there for exactly these moments, and slid it across the desk. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice gentle now. You're going to finish boot camp. You're going to graduate with your platoon. And then you're going to report to the School of Infantry like every other recruit. But you're also going to help develop the new MCMAP curriculum. Part-time, voluntary, on your terms. Staff Sergeant. That's not a request, Chen. That's me protecting you from the generals who want to turn you into a sideshow. You help develop curriculum. You maintain control of your image and your career. You refuse, and they'll assign you wherever they want. Sarah wiped her eyes, her mind racing. And the backlash, she asked quietly, from the other recruits, from the Marines I just beat. Tor's expression darkened. That's the part I'm worried about. Some people are going to celebrate you, others are going to resent you, and some, he paused, some are going to want to prove you got lucky. I can handle it. Can you? Tors looked at her seriously. Because this isn't going to be like any tournament you fought in. This is going to be personal, political, ugly. Sarah straightened, and something in her eyes hardened. Staff Sergeant, I've been handling people underestimating me my entire life. I think I can manage a few more weeks. Tor studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Dismissed, recruit. Get that cut above your eye checked at medical. And Chen. She paused at the door. What you did today, your father would be proud, whether you want him to be or not. Sarah's shoulders stiffened, and she left without responding. Tor sat alone in his office, staring at the video frozen on his screen. Sarah Chen, surrounded by 8 defeated Marines, calmly retrieving her glasses. He picked up his phone and dialed. Yeah, it's Tors. We need to talk about Chen. No, not to discipline her, to protect her, because what's coming next is going to be worse than any fight she's ever been in. Mess hall that evening felt like walking into a minefield. Sarah entered with her tray, scanning for an empty seat, and immediately felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. The normal cacophony of conversation had dropped to whispers. People were staring, pointing, some with admiration, many with something else entirely. That's her. No way she's that small in person. I heard it was staged. My buddy in security force says those guys are pissed. Sarah kept her head down and headed for her usual corner table. Before she could sit, Jessica Garrett appeared with 3 other female recruits from different platoons. "Mind if we join you?" Jessica asked, but she was already sitting and her tone made it clear this wasn't really a question. The other women, Sarah recognized them from morning formations, but didn't know their names, sat down with expressions that ranged from awe to fierce protectiveness. "I'm Rachel," said a tall African-American woman with the build of a volleyball player. "Delta Company, I just wanted to say, what you did today was incredible." "Inspired," added another, a Hispanic woman named Gomez. "I've been struggling, thinking about quitting, but after seeing you—" "It was just a demonstration," Sarah interrupted quietly, uncomfortable with the attention. "It was more than that," Jessica said firmly. "It was proof that we belong here." But not everyone felt that way. Across the mess hall, at a table dominated by Bravo Company recruits, a different conversation was happening. Dylan Kramer, 62, 205 pounds, former amateur MMA fighter with a record of 7-2, held court with his crew. "It was luck," Kramer said, loud enough to carry. "Those security force guys went easy on her, probably had orders not to hurt the diversity recruit." His buddies laughed, but the sound was forced, bitter. "Come on, man," one of them said. "You saw the video, she was." "I saw a girl get lucky against guys who were pulling their punches," Kramer interrupted. "Put her against someone who's actually trying, someone who knows how to fight for real, and she'd get destroyed." Thompson, Marcus Webb's friend who'd bet against Sarah weeks ago, was sitting nearby. He turned around. "Kramer, just admit you're mad that a girl half your size could probably kick your ass." The mess hall went quiet in their section. Kramer stood up slowly, his face flushing red. "You want to bet on that, Thompson? Because I'll fight her right now. No restrictions. Let's see how she does against someone who actually—" "Recruits," a drill instructor's voice cracked like thunder. "Did I authorize a debate club? Eat your food and shut your mouths." Everyone snapped back to their meals, but the damage was done. Lines had been drawn. The harassment started small. Day 1 after the demonstration, someone accidentally spilled an entire pitcher of water on Sarah's bed during evening cleanup. Her mattress was soaked. She had to sleep on the floor. Day 2, her gear went missing before morning inspection. She failed the inspection, received a formal reprimand, and had to do extra duty, cleaning the bathrooms until midnight. Day 3, during the obstacle course, someone had loosened the bolts on the rope climb apparatus. Sarah grabbed it and the entire structure shifted. She fell 8 feet, landing hard on her shoulder. Medical cleared her, just bruising, but the message was clear. It was always accidents, always deniable, always Bravo Company recruits nearby smirking. By day 4, Sarah was exhausted, running on 3 hours of sleep, her body covered in bruises from accidental collisions during formation, from accidentally being tripped during runs. Jessica noticed, so did Marcus. On the 5th night, Sarah sat alone in the bathroom at 200, practicing her techniques like always, but her movements were sluggish. Tired. She threw a punch combination and her form was off. "Your hip rotation is weak." Sarah spun around. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You should be asleep," Sarah said, quickly composing herself. "So should you, but here we are." Marcus stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Kramer and his boys are targeting you." "I noticed." "And you're not reporting it." Sarah was silent. Marcus sighed. "Look, I was wrong about you. I was an ass. I judged you based on size and assumed you couldn't hack it. I'm sorry." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Marcus's voice was firm. "What you did in that gym, That wasn't luck. That was years of training, dedication, skill. You earned that. And now these insecure dickheads are trying to tear you down because you made them feel small. Sarah's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. I didn't want this. I just wanted to serve, to be normal. There's no such thing as normal here. There's only good Marines and bad Marines. Marcus stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning I'm coming to you in the mess hall in front of everyone and I'm going to ask you to teach me. Really teach me. And you're going to say yes. Marcus. And then Rodriguez is going to ask. And Jessica. And probably half the platoon. Because we've all seen what you can do and we're smart enough to want to learn from the best. The best, Sarah laughed bitterly. I can barely pass PT. So, I can't do half the things you do on the mat. Everyone's good at something. He paused. Besides, you're going to need allies for what's coming. What's coming? Marcus's expression turned grim. Kramer challenged our platoon. Company-level MCMAP tournament. 5 matches, 2 weeks from tomorrow. Tours accepted. Sarah's blood ran cold. He what? Apparently the base commander thought it would be good for morale and inter-company competition. Marcus made air quotes. But everyone knows what it really is. It's Kramer trying to prove you're a fraud. He's going to pick his 5 best fighters and he's going to try to destroy us. And if we lose? If we lose, every female recruit on this depot, every small guy, everyone who looked at you and thought maybe I can do this too, they are all going to hear that you were just lucky. That size and strength matter more than skill. The weight of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. She sat down on the tile floor, suddenly unable to stand. I didn't ask for this. I know, Marcus sat down beside her, but it's here anyway, so what are we going to do about it? Before Sarah could answer, the bathroom door opened again. Jessica, followed by 4 more recruits from Alpha Company, including Rodriguez and 2 others Sarah barely knew. We heard about the tournament, Jessica said. We want in. We want you to train us, Rodriguez added. Really train us, not just basic MCMAP, but what you know, the real stuff. Sarah looked at their faces, all determined, all serious, all looking at her like she was something she'd never wanted to be, a leader. I'm not qualified to. Bullshit, Marcus interrupted. You're more qualified than any instructor on this base for actual fighting technique. Yes or no, Chen? Are you going to help us, or are you going to let Kramer win without a fight? Sarah thought about her father who'd wanted her to be special. About her mother who'd trained her to never back down. About the last 8 weeks of struggling, failing, barely surviving. About the female recruit she'd seen crying in the bathroom yesterday, who'd said she was going to quit because girls aren't strong enough for this. She thought about what Tors had said. What kind of symbol will you be? Sarah stood up, her shoulder throbbing, her body exhausted, but her mind crystal clear. 500 tomorrow, the auxiliary gym. Bring everyone who wants to learn, but I'm warning you, she looked at each of them in turn. What I teach isn't easy, it's going to hurt. You're going to fail a lot before you succeed, and there's no guarantee we'll win. But there's a guarantee we'll lose if we don't try, Marcus said, extending his hand. Sarah looked at it for a long moment, then shook it. 500, she repeated, don't be late. As the group dispersed, Jessica hung back. Sarah, she said quietly, thank you. For what? For not giving up, for showing us it's possible. Jessica's voice cracked slightly. My little sister wants to be a Marine. She's small like you. She's been watching my progress, asking if she'll be good enough. After today, I can finally tell her yes. After Jessica left, Sarah stood alone in the bathroom, staring at her reflection. The cut above her eyebrow had scabbed over. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked like she'd been through a war. And in a way she had. But the real war was just beginning. Sarah pulled out her phone, technically not allowed, but everyone had them hidden, and sent a single text message to a number she hadn't contacted in 2 months. "Dad, I need to talk." The response came within seconds. "About damn time, warrior, call me." Sarah smiled despite herself. Tomorrow, she'd start building an army. Tonight, she'd make peace with her past. Because in 2 weeks, Sarah Chen was going to war. And this time, she wasn't hiding anything. The auxiliary gym at 500 was freezing, lit only by flickering fluorescent lights that hummed like angry insects. Sarah arrived first, her breath visible in the cold air, and found 12 people already waiting. Not just Marcus, Jessica, and Rodriguez. There were recruits from other platoons, a few she'd never spoken to. 2 female recruits from Charlie Company who looked terrified but determined. Even Patterson, the karate black belt who'd been submitted in the original demonstration, stood at the back, arms crossed, expression neutral. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "First rule, leave your ego at the door. I don't care about your wrestling trophies, your karate belts, or how many fights you won in high school. On this mat, everyone starts at 0. For the next 2 weeks, they became a family forged in sweat and pain. Sarah taught them everything, not just techniques but philosophy, how to read an opponent's weight distribution, how to feel their intentions through their grip, how to turn strength into a liability. "Big guys telegraph," she explained during day 3, using Marcus as a demonstration dummy. "They're used to power working, so they commit fully. Watch, Marcus, grab me like you're trying to stop me." Marcus grabbed her shoulders. Sarah didn't move for 3 seconds, just felt his grip. "See how his weight is forward, how his arms are extended. He's strong, but he's given me his structure." In a flash, Sarah dropped her weight, grabbed Marcus's wrist, and used a simple arm drag to send him tumbling to the mat. Strong people create strong grips. Strong grips create leverage points. Leverage points create throws. Rodriguez tried it on Patterson, failed 3 times. On the 4th attempt, something clicked and Patterson hit the mat hard. "I felt it," Rodriguez shouted, excited. "I felt his weight shift." Sarah smiled. "Now do it 1,000 more times until you don't have to think about it." The sessions were brutal. Sarah was a demanding teacher, making them drill the same technique for hours until it was muscle memory. When someone complained, she'd demonstrate the consequence, showing how a sloppy arm bar could be escaped, how a poorly executed choke left you vulnerable to a counter. But she also showed them mercy. When Jessica broke down crying on day 7, exhausted and convinced she'd never get it, Sarah sat with her for an hour, breaking down a complex hip throw into 5 simple steps. "You're thinking too much," Sarah said gently. "Your body knows what to do, trust it." Jessica tried again. This time Marcus went flying. "I did it," Jessica screamed, then immediately helped Marcus up. "Oh God, are you okay?" Marcus grinned, rubbing his back. "Do it again. I want to make sure it wasn't luck." By day 10, something remarkable had happened. The group moved like a unit. They understood each other's timing, strengths, weaknesses. Rodriguez had become the takedown specialist. Marcus was the submission expert. Jessica had developed a vicious arm bar that made even Sarah wince. But Bravo Company wasn't idle. Kramer had assembled his team like it was a professional fight card. 5 of his best, himself, 2 wrestlers from his high school team who'd enlisted together, a guy who'd done Golden Gloves boxing, and Tyler Morrison, a 230-pound former college linebacker who'd been undefeated in every MCMAP match he'd fought. They trained too, publicly, loudly, making sure everyone saw them talking trash, building hype. "Alpha Company's got a mascot now," Kramer announced in the mess hall one night, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Little Chen's teaching them how to run away better." Thompson stood up. "Keep talking, Kramer. See what happens in the ring." "In the ring, I'm going to make your little princess tap out so hard." RECRUITS. A drill instructor shut it down, but the damage was done. The entire depot was talking about it. Bets were being placed. The base commander had decided to make it an official event. 300 people would be watching. The night before the tournament, Sarah couldn't sleep. She went to the auxiliary gym at 200 like always and found her entire team already there. Couldn't sleep either, Marcus said, shrugging. They didn't train. They just sat together on the mats talking about everything except the tournament, about home, about families, about why they joined. Patterson spoke for the first time about his older brother, a Marine who died in Afghanistan. I need to do this for him, need to prove I'm worthy of the uniform. Jessica talked about her little sister, the one who wanted to follow in her footsteps. Rodriguez confessed he'd almost quit week 2. Then I saw you, Chen, saw you struggle but never quit, made me think if you could keep going, so could I. Sarah told them about her father, about the 2 months of silence, about the phone call 2 weeks ago where she'd finally admitted she needed help. He said something I'll never forget, Sarah said quietly. Being strong isn't about never needing help. It's about being brave enough to ask for it when you do. Marcus checked his watch. It's 400. Tournament starts at 1300. We should probably try to sleep. Or, Jessica said with a mischievous grin, we could run through the plan one more time. They didn't sleep, they prepared. The gymnasium at 1300 was packed. 300 Marines, drill instructors, officers, even the base commander sat in the front row. The energy was electric, hostile, anticipatory. Alpha Company sat on one side, Bravo Company on the other. In the middle, a regulation MCMAP competition mat. Staff Sergeant Torres stood at the center with a microphone. Attention! This is an official company-level MCMAP tournament. 5 matches, 1 point each. First company to 3 points wins. Rules are standard. Tap out, knockout, or referee stoppage ends the match. Fighters show respect and discipline. He paused, looking directly at both teams. Match 1. Recruit Rodriguez, Alpha Company, versus Recruit Stevens, Bravo Company. Rodriguez walked to the mat and Sarah could see his hands trembling. Stevens was one of Kramer's wrestlers, 60, 190 pounds, confident swagger. The whistle blew. Stevens came in fast, shooting for a double-leg takedown. But Rodriguez had drilled this exact scenario 300 times. He sprawled, hips back, weight down, and caught Stevens' extended arm. The arm drag was textbook. Stevens hit the mat, Rodriguez took his back, and the rear naked choke was locked in within 20 seconds. Stevens tapped frantically. Alpha Company, 1 point. The crowd erupted. Alpha Company was screaming. Bravo Company looked shocked. Match 2, Jessica versus Bravo's boxer. The boxer tried to keep distance, using footwork and jabs, but Jessica was patient, waiting for him to overcommit. When he threw a heavy right hand, she caught his wrist, stepped in, and executed the hip throw she'd struggled with for a week. He landed hard, and Jessica's arm bar was immediate and devastating. He tapped in 15 seconds. Alpha Company, 2 points. Bravo Company was in chaos now. Kramer was screaming at his team, red-faced and furious. Match 3, Marcus versus one of Kramer's other wrestlers. This one was harder. The wrestler was skilled, experienced, and angry. For 2 minutes they grappled evenly, neither gaining advantage. Marcus was bigger, stronger, but the wrestler was technical. Then Marcus remembered something Sarah had taught him. When strength fails, use their strength against them. As the wrestler pushed, Marcus pulled, using a perfectly timed sacrifice throw that sent both of them to the mat. Marcus recovered faster, transitioned to mount, and rained down controlled strikes until the referee stopped it. Alpha Company, 3 points. Alpha Company wins. But the celebration was cut short. Wait, Kramer's voice boomed across the gym. We challenge for a bonus round, our best versus their best. Winner takes bragging rights. The base commander stood up. That's not in the official. I accept, Sarah said, standing. The gymnasium went dead silent. Tors grabbed her arm. Chen, you don't have to. I accept, she repeated louder. Kramer smiled like a shark. Not me, princess, him. He pointed to Tyler Morrison, the 230-pound linebacker, the undefeated fighter, the one who'd studied Sarah's videos for 2 weeks straight. Morrison stepped onto the mat, cracking his knuckles. Sarah removed her glasses, handed them to Jessica. Sarah, Jessica whispered, he's huge, and he's been training specifically to beat you. I know, Sarah said calmly. That's why I'm going to beat him. She walked to the center of the mat, and 300 people held their breath. The whistle blew, and Sarah Chen went to war one last time. Tyler Morrison didn't rush. That was the first sign he was different from the 8 Marines Sarah had faced weeks ago. He circled slowly, his footwork precise, his hands up in a proper guard. His eyes tracked her movements with cold calculation. He'd studied her, he knew her game. I've watched your video about 100 times, Morrison said, his voice low enough only Sarah could hear. I know every trick you've got. Sarah didn't respond. She was analyzing him, looking for weaknesses, but Morrison was good, really good. His stance was solid, his weight distribution was perfect. There were no obvious openings. They engaged. Morrison feinted with a jab, testing Sarah's reactions. She slipped it easily. He tried again, this time committing more. Sarah went to counter with her arm drag, her signature move, but Morrison had anticipated it. He pulled his arm back at the last second, breaking her grip. The crowd gasped. Morrison had just defended against Sarah's best technique. He pressed forward, using his size advantage to crowd her space. Sarah backed up, circling, trying to create distance. But Morrison was relentless, cutting off angles, herding her toward the edge of the mat. This was smart fighting, patient, technical. Morrison shot in for a takedown, but it was a feint. When Sarah sprawled to defend, he changed levels and caught her in a body lock. His arms were like steel bands around her torso, squeezing, lifting her off the ground. The crowd roared. This was it, Morrison was going to slam her. But Sarah had been here before, thousands of times. In her mother's gym, training with men twice her size, she knew what to do when strength overwhelmed technique. She stopped resisting. Morrison felt her go limp and instinctively adjusted his grip to prevent her from slipping out. That micro-adjustment, that split-second redistribution of his weight, was all Sarah needed. She hooked her leg around his, shifted her hips, and twisted. Morrison's balance broke. They went down together, but Sarah controlled the fall, landing in guard position, her legs wrapped around his waist, controlling him from the bottom. Not bad, Morrison grunted, trying to pass her guard. You too, Sarah replied, her legs squeezing, preventing his movement. For 90 seconds they battled in this position. Morrison trying to advance, Sarah defending, looking for opportunities. The crowd was on its feet. This was elite-level grappling, chess at maximum speed. Morrison was strong, but he was also getting tired. Sarah could feel his breathing becoming labored, his movements slightly less crisp. She'd been here before, too. She knew how to wait, how to be patient. Then Morrison made a mistake, a tiny one. He posted his left hand on the mat to create leverage for a pass attempt, and for just a moment his elbow was exposed. Sarah's hips exploded upward. She caught Morrison's extended arm, swung her legs up, and locked in a triangle choke, one leg across his throat, the other hooking behind her knee, her hands pulling his head down. Morrison's eyes went wide. He tried to stand, to slam his way out of the submission, but Sarah's legs were locked tight. He tried to pry them apart, but she'd done this 1,000 times, 10,000 times. The choke tightened. Morrison's face turned red, then purple. His movements became desperate, frantic. His hand slapped the mat, once, twice, 3 times. Tab, tab, tab. The referee pulled them apart. Sarah released immediately, rolling away and gasping for breath. The gymnasium exploded into chaos. Morrison lay on his back, coughing, one hand on his throat. Sarah crawled over to him, extended her hand. "Good fight," she said, meaning it. Morrison stared at her hand for a long moment. Then he took it, letting her help him to his feet despite their size difference. "You're the real deal," he said hoarsely. "Respect." They touched fists, and the crowd's roar doubled in volume. But Sarah wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at Dylan Kramer, who stood at the edge of the mat, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, anger, embarrassment, and something else. Something that might have been respect. Sarah walked toward him, and the gymnasium fell silent. She stopped directly in front of Kramer, barely reaching his chest, and extended her hand. "Good match," she said simply. Kramer looked at her hand like it might bite him. His crew watched, waiting to see what he'd do. The entire base held its breath. Then Kramer took her hand and shook it. "I was wrong," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "About you, about a lot of things. You're the real thing, Chen." The applause was deafening. 3 years later, Corporal Sarah Chen stood at the front of a classroom at the School of Infantry, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton. 40 recruits sat before her, 23 men, 17 women, all watching her with expressions ranging from awe to skepticism. On the screen behind her, frozen at the 45-second mark, was the security footage that had changed everything. "This video has been viewed over 2 million times on internal Marine Corps networks," Sarah began, her voice steady and confident now. "And it's taught everyone the wrong lesson." The recruits looked confused. "People watch this and think it's about me winning, about the underdog triumphing, about proving that size doesn't matter." Sarah clicked to the next slide. "But that's not what this video is about." The new slide showed a different image. Sarah at the rope climb during week 3, falling, failing, covered in mud and sweat. This is what the video is about, not the 45 seconds of victory, the 8 weeks of failure that came before it. Because here's what nobody tells you: I almost quit, twice. I cried myself to sleep most nights. I was the worst recruit in my platoon by every measurable standard except one. She paused, meeting their eyes. I refused to give up. A hand raised, a female recruit, small like Sarah had been, nervous and uncertain. "Corporal Chen, what if we're just not strong enough? What if we can't do it?" Sarah smiled, remembering asking her mother the same question when she was 10 years old. "Then you get smart enough to make strength irrelevant. You find your advantage. Maybe it's technique, maybe it's endurance, maybe it's the ability to inspire others or the stubbornness to outlast everyone else. The Marine Corps doesn't need 40,000 copies of the same soldier. It needs 40,000 different kinds of warriors." After class, Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, now an infantry platoon sergeant with 2 combat deployments under his belt, met her outside. "Your dad's on base," Marcus said he wants to take you to lunch. Sarah's relationship with her father had healed slowly. He'd attended her graduation, shaken Tor's hand, and told Sarah he was proud, not of her fighting skills but of her character. "Tell him I'll meet him at 1200, Sarah said. "I've got another class first." The advanced combatives class, with the instructor candidates. "Yeah, we're covering multiple opponent scenarios today," Sarah grinned. "Going to need you to be one of my demonstration dummies." Marcus laughed. "After 3 years you'd think I'd learn to say no. How many of us this time?" 8. "Of course it is." Marcus shook his head, but he was smiling. "You know, Professor, you've changed a lot since boot camp." "Have I?" "You're not hiding anymore." Sarah thought about that. He was right. She'd stopped trying to be invisible, stopped trying to be normal. She'd accepted what Tors had told her 3 years ago. She was a symbol whether she wanted to be or not. The only choice was what kind. Across the base, In various training facilities, 47 female Marines now served as MCMAP instructors, a 400% increase since Sarah's demonstration. The number of women attempting infantry training had tripled. More importantly, the success rate had doubled because the training had evolved to focus on technique over pure strength. In Gunnery Sergeant Mike Torr's office, he'd been promoted twice since that day, a photograph hung on the wall. Alpha Company Graduation Day. Sarah Chen stood front and center, still the shortest in the formation, still wearing her glasses, still looking like someone's little sister. But everyone knew better now. The plaque beneath the photo read, "Never underestimate, never quit, always earn it." And in recruit depots from San Diego to Paris Island, when new recruits complained about being too small, too weak, too different, instructors pulled up a video. 45 seconds that had become Marine Corps legend. But the real story wasn't in those 45 seconds. It was in the 8 weeks before, the 2 weeks after, the 3 years since. It was in every female recruit who saw Sarah and thought, maybe I can. Every small guy who refused to quit. Every Marine who learned that the only limitations that truly matter are the ones you accept. Sarah Chen had never accepted limitations. She destroyed them. Not in 45 seconds, but in 8 weeks of failure, in 2 weeks of building an army, in 3 years of proving again and again that warrior comes in all sizes. That evening, as Sarah drove off base, she passed the obstacle course where she'd struggled so many times. Recruits were running it now, a new generation facing their own demons. One of them, a small female recruit, was at the rope climb, struggling, failing, trying again. Sarah pulled over, got out of her car, and walked to the edge of the course. "You've got this," she called out. The recruit looked over, saw Sarah's rank and uniform, and nodded. She grabbed the rope and tried again, failed again. "One more time," Sarah shouted. "Trust your technique." The recruit tried again. This time she made it halfway, then 2/3, then 3/4. She reached the top. Her scream of triumph echoed across the base, and Sarah smiled, remembering that feeling. That moment when you prove to yourself that you can do the impossible. Sarah got back in her car and drove away, but not before the recruit called out, "Thank you, Corporal." "Don't thank me," Sarah called back. "Thank yourself, you did the work." Because that was the real lesson of those 45 seconds. Not that Sarah Chen was special, but that anyone could be. You just had to be willing to fail 8 weeks worth of times. To get back up after every fall. To turn weakness into strength. And to never, ever accept the limitations others try to place on you. Sarah Chen hadn't changed the Marine Corps in 45 seconds. She'd changed it by refusing to quit for 8 weeks. By building an army in 2 weeks. By proving herself every single day for 3 years. And by showing every Marine who came after her that the only thing standing between you and impossible was you. The end.